And I'm delighted now to be joined by James Evans, who led the all-party parliamentary pro-life group inquiry onto fetal pain in the UK Parliament. James, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Although I should say that the politicians, Fiona Bruce and Lord Bolton, they led the inquiry. I was just the coordinator and was asked to do the work behind the scenes.
You brought it all together.
So I can't take credit. Yeah. Sorry.
So James, maybe before we talk a little bit about what happened in that inquiry, tell us a little bit about what we know about fetal pain.
Well, fetal pain was first really raised back in the 1980s. Back in the 1980s, doctors didn't think that babies felt pain. And so when babies were having surgery, little newborn babies, they weren't given painkiller, because it was just an assumption that they didn't feel pain. And then they realized that when they did give babies painkiller, they did so much better in these operations. And so it was towards the late 80s that people started thinking, okay, so what about pain in unborn babies? Do they feel pain? And they demonstrated back in the late 80s that actually they did. So this has actually been around about over 3 decades that we've known that unborn babies feel pain just as much as a newborn baby does.
One of the parts of this debate, James, is of course, well, at what stage does the unborn baby feel pain? Do we have more evidence that gives us more detail on this?
Oh yes, absolutely. But and there's a range that we think pain would begin, and scientists do disagree. But there's a consensus of where the majority of scientists think. I mean, it's an inexact science when you start trying to measure pain. It would be impossible to prove whether you or I feel pain. And so to actually say that a baby feels pain is even harder, because they can't put their experience into words. And it's even harder still with an unborn baby because they're harder to see. But you can actually come up with a scoring system for a baby's pain register of what's happening with their face. And with ultrasound, you can actually see and measure and come up with a scoring system of how much pain an unborn baby is feeling. So you can actually measure it.
And what have they found when they've done these measurements then? What have they found, James, when they've done these measurements as to when a baby starts to feel pain, at what gestation?
Okay, so some scientists are saying it could be from 10 weeks or it could be from 12 weeks. And there's a paper that we'll talk about later that came out this year that is suggesting it could be from 12 weeks onwards. And then there's another group who say
the shorthand of it, James, is it's much earlier than we thought. I mean, I know currently, for example, for in utero surgery, which is just amazing, like for example, for babies who are having surgery because they have spina bifida, they're given pain relief at, the surgery could be at 20 weeks. So there's obviously an acknowledgement that they need it.
Yes, absolutely. It's from 20 weeks they're given painkiller as standard. And it's only not quoted as 19 or 18 weeks because they don't do those surgeries at that time. If that spina bifida surgery would be at 18 weeks, you can guarantee that they would be giving painkiller at 18 weeks. So it's not 20 weeks or later. That just happens to be when that spina bifida surgery is.
But of course,
so it's definitely from them, but before it's harder to say. But it could be, but obviously, as a precautionary principle, they should be given painkiller anyway to any surgery.
The interesting thing, James, about this discussion on fetal pain, it's not a situation where we just have people who would call themselves pro-life discussing it, but we have evidence from people who call themselves pro-choice or neutral to the issue also kind of raising concerns about it. Tell us about that.
Okay, well, for a start, I emailed RCOG. They're the health body that oversees medical guidelines to do with abortion. And I disagree with a lot of things that they say. But I did email them and I asked them outright, do you give pain relief prior to an abortion? And RCOG, they did email me back, and eventually they did give a direct answer to the question that yes, consultants do give fentanyl prior to a potassium chloride injection. That's the lethal injection into the heart that brings on a heart attack. So RCOG do give, their consultants do give painkiller, but their official documentation denies fetal pain and has done since 2010. France, they've had law saying you must give fetal painkiller prior to an abortion. They've had that since 2008. That was their latest update. It might even have been earlier, but I can't discover that. So they've had fetal pain laws for over 10 years. We've got the NHS with their spina bifida surgery in utero. So they give painkiller before spina bifida surgery. That's from 20 weeks onwards. Reconsidering fetal pain. Now,
that was the Journal of Ethics, the Journal of Medical Ethics article. Tell us about that.
Okay, so Dr. Stuart Derbyshire, he was the baddie, if you like. He actually almost arguably denied that toddlers feel pain. He argued that pain was so subjective that maybe even toddlers or babies don't feel pain. So I kind of regarded him as a baddie, and he was one of the cherry-picked witnesses for the RCOG when they came up with their fetal pain legislation. And so what was amazing was this year, he did a complete U-turn. And instead of saying fetal pain cannot happen, doesn't happen, actually now he's saying, actually, I think it is. So even he himself is pro-choice. So this is the equivalent of Saul having a Damascene experience, and now St. Paul, he's going around preaching the gospel, which he's actually doing. He's telling people that people should be told about fetal pain and should be advised to take painkiller, particularly with second trimester and third trimester abortions.
And yet here in Ireland, when our politicians had the opportunity to insert an amendment into our legislation which would allow pain relief during the abortion procedure, they didn't take that opportunity.
Absolutely. We were watching that on the news when it happened, and it was quite shocking to see that news report come out that the TDs were laughing. They were laughing when they were being told about fetal pain, which our brain laughs. We laugh when we hear a ridiculous idea that's inconceivable. And the people who were coming up with the laws that you now have, they couldn't conceive the idea that an unborn baby could feel pain, which they just dismissed it. They didn't look into it at all. And there's an ocean of evidence out there, and that has been out there for years.
What has been your experience, especially, James, in connection to the inquiry that was looking at fetal pain in the UK Parliament? What was the response and the reaction from your representatives? Well,
people seem to be in possibly three camps. One is, oh, good grief, that's terrible. Another is, that is too shocking. Please don't talk to me about that. And the third one is possibly the most common of, this is fake news. That's ridiculous. You're just saying that just to come up with a point to say abortion is bad. So that's just shutting down.
So do you think there's a lot of denial around it then?
Yes, denial would be the most common response. Yes. Unfortunately, yeah, we're in a climate where truth actually doesn't shout out that loudly. Yeah.
Especially when truth doesn't shout out that loudly when it doesn't connect up with a strong narrative on an issue like abortion, when it doesn't kind of fit in with the messaging that's trying to put out there. And maybe that's what happened here in Ireland, is that it's easier to deny the humanity of the baby. Because of course, if you admit the baby can feel pain, you're admitting the baby's humanity.
Mm. Plus, there's other reasons. Because unborn babies are not recognised as human beings in law, they can be overlooked. But there's a court case at the moment. There's a legal bid by a lady who was not warned about fetal pain before her very late term abortion, and she's now doing a legal bid to get the health service to actually give the proper information to warn people about fetal painkiller. And those sorts of cases coming through, maybe the health service would actually listen to that, particularly if they're being sued for negligence, which is also another possibility. But that's kind of uncomfortable. We want our health services to be working. I mean, it would be tragic if the only thing they listened to was being sued by angry mothers, but that would reach the headlines, and that would raise the profile of this. But it's never good to take the money away from the health service.
Well, James, thank you so much for all the work that you have done on this issue, and thank you for giving us your time today.
Cool. Thank you very much indeed.
I'm sure many of you, like me, are repulsed of thinking about what unborn babies feel during abortion procedures, but hopefully you're motivated to do something about it. There's details below as to how you can contact your public representative and let them know how you feel about the issues. Also, many of the pieces of evidence that James mentioned today, you can click on a list of those references if you want to educate yourself further on the issue.